Hello, everyone. I am Jennifer Miller. I am the author and illustrator of Confident Parents, Confident Kids, the book, and also the organization by the same name. What a joy and delight it is to be with you here today, Sunday, where parents can join and we can talk about our most meaningful, important role of parenting. I've got a lot of great discussion items for us today, but really we're going to dive into how do you raise confident kids and how do you feel confident in your parenting in these really confusing times. I have been working in the field of social and emotional learning for 25 plus years. Half of that time I spent in schools working with teachers and principals, asking the question, how do we teach vital skills like empathy, problem solving, perspective taking, conflict management? And then when I became a parent, I really shifted my focus to support families and how we build these vital skills. I'm also the parent of a 14-year-old. I have a teenager who is there he is. He is now taller than I am, as you can see in the picture. And I hugged him this morning. He was even taller. So I'm going to need to measure him very soon. But thank you for joining us. We're going to have a dialogue today. I want to learn about you and your children and their strengths and their challenges and how we can learn more about their development to really raise confident kids. So let's get started. Please go ahead and throw into the chat your name, your location. Where are you joining from? I'm joining from Columbus, Ohio. We are having our first snow right now. So it feels like a magical moment because I can see snow falling out of my window. I know that folks are going to be joining from all over the world today. So I can't wait to see your name, where you're joining from. Tell me how many children you have. Tell me their ages. And also, I'd love to hear one strength of each child. And so I'll model that for you. My child is incredibly kind and thoughtful. He notices when others are in pain and is sensitive to others, comforting others, and just really kind to others. So join me. Tell me about again your name, where you're joining from, and also how many children do you have? How old are they? So we have a sense of ages and stages, and then a strength of each child. Okay, well, let's go ahead and dive in. Again, today we are talking about raising confident kids. And really, that was the big question I had when I became a parent 14 years ago. It was really my biggest question. How am I going to be confident in raising children when I have no idea what I'm doing? We don't get training. I figured I couldn't believe it when the hospital sent me home with my baby and just said, go to it. Isn't there more than just that, right? But when I was still working with schools when he was a baby, but my curiosity really got raised when he became a toddler and he became more communicative. And I remember one day I came into his room and I had to stop him from playing because we were going to a library story time. And I think he was maybe a year and a half old. And I said, okay, pick your last thing to play and we're gonna move on. We need to go. And he didn't say anything. He stood up from whatever he was very focused on playing. He got red in the face and he came over. walked right over to my legs and swatted at me. And I, more than his reaction to his anger, my surprise came from my own reaction. I had such a mashup of emotions. I was upset. My first reaction was I wanted to cry and run away. I felt like my tiny little toddler was punishing me. And then the rush of feeling that came next was, are you insane? This is a toddler. Why am I so upset about this? And then we're really good at beating ourselves up as parents, right? So I was doing a really good job of that. Then I started to get a fear. What if I'm raising a violent child? And then again, the thinking came in, well, I study child development. Children who are toddlers can't express themselves through words, so they physically lash out. This is very developmentally normal. So again, why am I losing it in this moment? And that one moment, I went away and I sat down with my journal after we had managed the moment. I don't even remember what I ended up doing, but I walked away at a later time and journaled about it and thought, this is why parenting is so complicated. It's not the basics of every day, just getting our child from here to there and the logistics of the routine. It is dealing with this mashup of emotions that we have. Oh, I'm seeing friends joining us. Allison, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. Allison has a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, and an 8-year-old, all assertive, kind, and curious. I love it. That's wonderful. And a full household. Bex West is from the UK, 2 children, nearly 13 daughter, who's incredibly kind and empathetic. Oh, I love this. Takes the title of the best sister ever. That's wonderful. Son, age 7 on the spectrum, very empathetic, super loving. Bex, welcome. Thanks so much for writing in the chat. Again, we're introducing ourselves. I'm Jennifer Miller of Confident Parents, Confident Kids. I'm going to be with you over the next few hours, and I really encourage you to write in your name and where you're joining from, your children's ages, and also their strengths. I'd love to hear, and very much want this to be a dialogue so that we're talking together about our most important roles. This is so important. I say this at the beginning of every single dialogue or webinar that I do. This has nothing to do with perfect parenting. Is there perfect parenting? I don't believe there is such a thing. So we're not talking about perfect parenting today. And in fact, my belief is that part of being a confident parent is having the humility to realize that we are all in this learning process all the way through every age and stage. Our children are learning and need to make mistakes and have accidents and failures in order to develop. And we are developing as adults, and we need to have accidents and mistakes and seek forgiveness when we mess up, when we say things that really don't align with our deepest values. I love this. My husband challenged me a few years ago to ask the question, what's the purpose of family? And having worked almost a decade in working with families, I had never asked that question. It seems insane, right? I took it for granted, but I really love this definition. We are called to be strong companions and clear mirrors to one another, to seek those who reflect with compassion and a keen eye how we're doing, whether we seem centered or off course. We need the nourishing company of others to create the circle needed for growth, freedom, and healing. I absolutely love that quote. And I love the fact that it talks about a circle needed for growth. We are growing all the time as parents, and we are enabled to grow because our children are challenging us in ways that we need to be challenged in order to grow. So that is the gift of family life for sure. Building your emotional intelligence, again, how we are learning and growing emotionally and socially matters. While learning about your child's development lessens anxiety and increases your sense of confidence. So we know um, anxiety was at high levels before the pandemic, and then the past year and a half, we've been through a global pandemic where anxiety levels have increased significantly. And you're only human if you've dealt with anxiety throughout these really complicated times. So, in our parenting, how do we support our kids through these complicated times? We can do so by learning about their development and by building our own social and emotional intelligence. So important. So, you're doing it today. You will be doing it today. So, hopefully, I'll ask by the end, are you breathing more easily? Are you feeling a bit more confident? Are you feeling a bit more confident in what you're doing as a parent? And we'll assess as a community whether you're feeling that way. So great. Okay, so I want you. I'm grateful to Moshi for the work that they do in preparing children for bedtime with sleep stories, and mindfulness is so key for children to learn, but also as adults and in our role as parents, it's vital that we stay centered and grounded. So in that spirit, I'd like you to take a couple deep breaths, and then we're going to imagine our children at graduation day. So I'm going to be quiet for just a moment and ask you to take a first deep breath in and a deep breath out to the count of 4. Another deep breath in and a deep breath out to the count of 4. Thank you for doing that with me. And what I'd like you to do is in your mind's eye, and maybe you want to either relax your eyes, feel free to look away from the screen, close your eyes, either way. But I want you to imagine one of your children, maybe your oldest child, or just pick one of your children at their high school graduation day. And we're going to use that as an end. It's not an end, it's a beginning as well, but it's one end that signifies a passage of time. Maybe they'll move away from home after that. So let's picture that child at graduation, high school graduation day. You're having a party at your home, and you've invited your child's favorite teachers. And in the midst of the party, one of the teachers, your child's absolute favorite, stands up with their grape juice and says, I want to make a toast to your child. I want to say that your child is. What do you want them to say about your child? Think for a moment, and if you have a piece of paper and a pen to jot it down, just make a few notes. What do you want that teacher to say about your child? And go ahead and add it into the chat. We'd love to hear. What do you want that teacher to say about your child? My child is in 8th grade. He's on the threshold of high school. So envisioning his graduation day in some ways feels like a lifetime away, and in some ways it feels like it's going to go fast. Morgan says, my kiddo is kind. I love it. I love it. Thanks, Morgan. Yeah. What other things do you hope that your teacher would say about your child at graduation day? Maybe they've taught them for 4 years. Beck says always tried their best. Yeah, boy, that's important, giving their best. I love that. And that's something that can continue to benefit them throughout their lives. Thank you for that. Keep writing in. Let us know, what do you see your teachers saying about your child, or would be so proud if they said about your child on their graduation day. So we're kind of beginning with the end in mind a bit and thinking about what are our hopes and dreams for our children. I think leading with our hopes and dreams for our children can lead us to thinking about our current day practices and how we're working toward those hopes and dreams for our children. So what are your hopes and dreams for your children? Again, type away in the chat if you have a thought. Tell me, what are your hopes and dreams for your children? I'll add, for my 14-year-old, I really hope that he feels confident in expressing who he is, his whole self, his whole heart and spirit. I really, that's a big hope for me, that he feels like he can express all of who he is. What are your hopes and dreams for your children? I'd also like you to think about your own role as a parent. What are your hopes for your parenting? What do you care about being as a parent? As a parent, I want to be trustworthy. I want to be patient. I want to be kind. What are your hopes for your parenting? And feel free. I'd love to use the chat as much as possible. So feel free to type them in the chat as you think about your hopes. Allison says that my daughter loves and values learning. I love that. Yeah, I agree. We've had a goal in the past couple years, especially with how strange school has been with the pandemic, that we really work on creating joy in learning, that our son learns about that learning can be joyful, that it can be a really joyful process. Beck says to be happy, do what they love, follow their dreams. I love that. Yeah. So you want to support them in whatever their dreams may be. That's wonderful. Well, I worked with some other researchers, and we asked a whole bunch of parents the same question. What are your hopes for your children? What are your hopes for your own parenting? And then we looked at the alignment with social and emotional skills. And we thought maybe there would be some outliers, but there weren't. There was an absolute tie between what parents said their hopes were for their children and for their own parenting and social emotional skills. Gigi, if we could see that next slide, it'll show us that connection. So a lot of parents said, similar to you, I hope my children are happy, kind, loving, confident, empathetic. And for their own parenting, I hope that I am patient, happy, kind, have high expectations. And we looked at how those fit in with skills that we can build through our everyday routines, our everyday interactions, skills like self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. And every single one of those hopes can be built through those social emotional skills. To me, this is an important lens to see our most difficult challenges in parents. I'm sorry, in our parenting. What if we said, when we had a really difficult challenge, How is this an opportunity to build a skill in my child? And how is this an opportunity to build a social and emotional skill in myself? So, really, really important. We're going to talk next about our children's development. And I see that the folks who have joined today are joining with children of various ages and stages. So we're going to talk about development at various ages and stages and how we can notice what our children, what they're working on socially and emotionally, what milestones they're approaching, and then also ways in which we can support that social and emotional development at various ages and stages. That if we go back one more for just a sec, Gigi, thank you. We develop at a consistent progression. In other words, babies become toddlers, become preschoolers, and that seems pretty universal. But the rate of change varies considerably between children. So we have to really observe our child in order to understand their rate of development. And sometimes some aspects of their development are much more advanced than other. Maybe they are linguistically, language wise, they are very advanced, but emotionally or socially, they're not as advanced. So we have to be keenly aware of what they're working on so that we can meet them where they are. Okay, thanks. Also, we need to take in consideration their temperament. Temperament are the inborn traits that our children kind of reflexively have in them from birth. So in other words, they kind of are their emotional defaults. And some questions you can ask when thinking about temperament are, how does my child react to new people, new places, new challenges? Do they greet it with a wide smile, or are they scared? Are they cautious? The important thing to note about temperament, and I encourage you to check out the book. If you are interested in temperament, there's a lot more resources in really understanding what your children's temperament is. But when you try to look at temperament, all temperaments were created with a strength. They are all rigged for our child's survival. So if our child approaches a new challenge with fear, we may worry about that, like, oh no, they're not going to take risks that they need to take in order to be successful. But the truth is that fear may be a really important caution. And I'll tell you, as a parent of a teenager, you're going to be really glad for that sense of caution when they're a teenager, right? So there's an asset there. And it could be that we look at ways to give them opportunities to walk into that fear, so that we balance that asset with the opportunity to take healthy risks. So there's always a way to look at temperament or an emotional default and an instant reaction to things, as we ask the question, how is it a strength? And then how can we build on that strength? And how can we look for ways to give them experiences that balance it out, if that makes sense to you? All right. So, one thing I wanted to be sure and say about development, we have this notion, and perhaps it's because we focus on achievement, and kind of live in a more competitive society. But we have this notion that earlier is better, that our child needs to read sooner than other children, and that's an important thing, or that they need to talk first, or that they need to walk first, or that they need to develop in ways that are earlier than their peers. This is a misconception. Earlier is not better. And in fact, children can grow to dislike topics that like reading, if it's forced down their throat before they're ready, they can get really frustrated. And this kind of shows, if you stay in the learning zone, they stay curious and engaged. But if you push them too far ahead, they can get frustrated. And if you lag too far behind and they're not challenged, they can get bored. So there, indeed, in parenting, using mindfulness strategies, in other words, really paying attention to where your child is in their development, makes a huge difference in your ability to be responsive to their needs and challenge them when they need to be challenged, but not push them so far that they get out of the learning zone. So, uh, really important stuff. Okay, so oh, you know what, Gigi? Let's just move on to developmental ages and stages. So we're gonna start in the, thank you, in the baby years. And we may feel that in the baby years there's not much going on. They're sleeping a lot, right? They're crying, they're eating, they're going to the bathroom, we're changing lots of diapers. And we're also completely exhausted. But we are, in the baby years, we are setting the pattern for their healthy relationships. So their brain is expanding exponentially at this time. And in fact, it is the only time in a human's life when they can learn while they are asleep. So it's truly incredible. I wish I knew this when my child was a baby, that they can be sleeping, you can be pushing the stroller, and they are still learning from your talk, from their environment, from the tone in their environment. So it's truly incredible how much learning is going on when we think that really kind of simple, basic human functions are happening. The love that you give them during this time is absolutely critical to their feeling of safety and security. And this really helps determine their ability to create healthy relationships throughout their lives. We know this to be true. And when they're crying, when they're seeking your help, every time you provide for their needs, you're showing them that they have a trusting source for their survival, that they can feel safe, that you love them and are responsive to their needs, and that they can grow and change and be safe with you, because you will take care of their needs. So, so although the baby years seem socially and emotionally simple, they're not. And in fact, being able to provide that love and provide for the needs of babies can be incredibly complicated for a parent who is exhausted up all night, who is drained by a baby who's crying typically 2 to 3 hours a day. So taking care of our own needs is absolutely critical to our baby's health. So how are we, this mother depicted, the baby's been crying for a while, and this mother is literally sitting down on the floor and going into herself and taking some deep breaths to calm down, to help regain her ability to be calm and helpful to the baby. She also needs to get away. How can you enlist grandparents or caring others to care for the baby at some times so that you get a break? So caring for yourself is really important in caring for your baby. All right, let's talk about the challenges of the toddler years. And Gigi, I don't know if you can make this one big, but it's a cartoon, so thank you. It's hard to see. But how many of you have experienced this scene in a grocery store, in a shopping store, where you're going through the line, there's candy at the checkout, and your child is tired, they're overstimulated by all the stuff around them, and they just have a complete melt. Maybe they ask for candy and you say no, and that is it. It just tips them over the edge and they lose it. They're crying, they're screaming, they're kicking, and perhaps there are a bunch of people behind you, and you are feeling judged, perhaps humiliated, perhaps struggling with this moment with your child who's losing it. Maybe you also have time constraints. So often that's the case as parents, right? So I'd like give me an amen in the chat if this has happened to you, or a raise hand, or just a me too if this situation has happened to you. Um, I think so many of us have had this situation and gone away and said, I I did not, how did I rise to the occasion? And it is not easy when you have so many emotions and you're also under pressure. So it's good to come away from these situations and ask the question, what could I have done in that moment? Have any of you been through this, and what did you do? And were you proud of what you did? Or would you do it a different way in the future? How do you handle this? Tell me in the chat, type it in. How do you handle this situation when your child is completely losing it in public, and people are waiting on you? You're in line, you're at the checkout. What do you do to model your own self management skills and to help your child through this situation that's obviously difficult for them? Any thoughts? Certainly. Beck said, bought it and ran. I love it. Yeah, I mean, right? Yeah, you gotta. Sometimes you're in that situation where you think to yourself, "I cannot get back here. Like I have got to get this done. So quick, get it and go." Sarah says, "Carried on with people staring." Right. I mean, they can judge away, but the truth is you're stuck in this situation, and so you've got to kind of move on, and then help your child get to a place where they're calmer. I think I recall one time where I actually left the cart, and we went into the car, and I got him safely in the car, and he just kind of cried and cried, and I just waited until he felt better. But it is really difficult to know how to deal with that, and I think it's a perfect example of how being a parent tests our own self-management skills. And we know in those moments that our child is watching, so it is always an opportunity to help them. How can we help them get to a place, a non-public place, where they can calm down? And once they're calm, how can we talk through it with them? Maybe even do a practice run where we go back and say, how could we do this in a way where we're working together? And we can't get candy every time, but I know you were hungry and tired. If you're upset, maybe you can tug on my sleeve if you're not feeling up to talking. But is there a way that we can really use the moment in the future as a teaching opportunity to teach self-management skills? Okay, Gigi. So tell me, when you see, and Gigi, could you go big with this? Thank you. Um, when you see this, this is an illustration that I did at the beginning, actually, of the pandemic, when we in the States were the schools were shutting down. Um, when you see this picture, how does it make you feel? Just type some feeling words in the chat if you would. How does this picture make you feel? Just thinking about what we've been through in the pandemic as families. How does this make you feel? And Gigi, maybe we'll go to the next slide and take a look at that one. I have the same question. So our children got a master's degree in surviving and thriving during tough times in the past few years. How do these slides make you feel when we think about the pandemic? Come on, feeling words. You can do it. Type them in. It can be quick. What I want to hear. How does thinking about the pandemic with your children make you feel? I think it has been very challenging. Allison says, I love this, grateful and tired. Wow, that sums it up for me. Grateful and tired. Yeah, at times overwhelmed. Beck says, I feel sad they've missed out on so much. Absolutely. Sad. At times I was really fearful and worried about children missing out on things. Yeah, so I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. I bring this up because our awareness of our feelings becomes a key lesson in the preschool years. So we're moving from babies to toddlers. Now we're going to talk about preschoolers. Our preschoolers can feel completely overwhelmed by their emotions, and they don't have a sense of the fact that these body sensations that they're getting, like their heart rate increases, or they may feel sweaty, or their face gets red when they get angry, that all the body sensations that we kind of take for granted that go along with our big feelings can be super confusing to preschoolers. And it actually adds to their upset. The other thing that adds to their upset is their inability to name their feelings, to talk about them, because they don't have a feelings vocabulary yet. In fact, language development happens first. A feelings vocabulary happens later, mostly because we are not used to talking about feelings as much as our preschoolers need in our family lives. So it is really critical that we begin especially when our children are preschoolers, but through every age and stage, to use feelings words. And often when I ask adults, what are you feeling? They will give me thoughts, but we actually need to use our feeling words like I'm grateful, I'm sad, I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed, I'm bored, I'm frustrated. But our children need to develop that feelings vocabulary so that they can work on calming down. And maybe you've heard the expression, name it to tame it. It is true that several things happen when we name our feelings. When we name our feelings, we not only express what's going on inside of us, what's in our hearts that's just wanting to get out, but we also seek understanding. We ask for help from another by saying what we're feeling. And that act alone begins to calm our heart rate. It begins to help us calm down because we are seeking support in our big feelings. So it is that critical that we begin to use feelings language in family life. Gigi, could you roll 2 forward? Then one more. Yeah. Okay. Could we go big with that one? Thank you. So there are some really wonderful feelings posters out there. This was a favorite, Jim Borgman's feeling poster that I used when Ethan was little. His favorite face was love struck, but he would pick out the face that he was feeling each day. This is a really easy printable sheet of feelings that you can hang up on your refrigerator. But having feeling words or feeling faces, emojis around your house is just a nice reminder to check in every day with your children and your teens, by the way, and ask the question, how are you feeling? What do you feel like today? Because it begins to help build their emotional vocabulary, and it's a twofer because they build their self-management skills in the process. So super important. Check it out, especially during the tough times that we have been in. Expressing feelings is an important one for families. All right, so let's move into the school age years, kind of the range of 8 to 12. I think of this, if you have an 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old, this is a really magical time. They are starting to reinvent the rules of life for themselves. So they've been told what to do and who they are up to this point. But now they are beginning to define things for themselves. And certainly they have a lot of cues, a lot of information. The peers around them really make a difference in influencing their thinking. Teachers, coaches, parents all help them to begin to define their sense of identity. The magic about this time is also that they are still very much learning through play and their imagination, and they're getting really good at collaborating with one another so that they can discover they're building new worlds by working closely with friends and peers. And this happens in school and out of school time. This is also the start of puberty. So they are going through many physical changes, but also social and emotional changes. And it's important to recognize, I think when I got to the point of 8 or 9 years old, I said, it's too early. But it isn't too early. In fact, they are starting to change into pre-adolescence. And so we need to take note of that and support them in making good choices, in having choices to make, to give them options, even if they're so simple. Like, do you want juice or water for lunch? Do you want to use a pen or a pencil for your homework? These small little choices seem mundane and simple, but give them a sense of control over their lives and give them good rehearsal for making good choices. It is also a time as our children move into the preteen years that they begin to cocoon. Because their bodies are changing and their social awareness is changing. Importantly, I think it's important to know that as their social awareness rises, they become more aware of the people around them and the perspectives of the people around them. They also rise in their social anxiety. They become more self-conscious. If they weren't aware of how they were dressed or how their hair was flying away that day, all of a sudden They're very aware. They're aware that they might potentially be judged or criticized. This often sends our 10, 11, 12-year-olds into their rooms for extended periods of time. They become more private. And it is not something to worry about, but it is a normal part of development that they are just becoming more socially aware. And the thing that we can do to help them through those times when they're worried about criticism is to keep it in check by asking them good open-ended questions about their social interactions. In other words, if our daughter comes home and says, "No one likes me, and everyone was looking at me in the hallway, and I know that they were thinking my shoes are so weird," we can check their thinking. We can ask good questions like, well, what was going on that day? And were there any challenges in classes with teachers? Maybe other students weren't in a very good mood. Are you sure it was all about you, or was it about their environment? So we can challenge some of their notions about the criticism they're perceiving to make sure that they're really well assessing and empathizing and perspective taking with the others in their environment. Their emotions are becoming more complex, and so we have to grow with them, right, in their feelings, language, and ability to communicate their feelings. Now, this is a kind of brainstorm of all the feelings that I felt when I first became a parent. So think about that when you very first brought your baby home from the hospital, you're a brand new parent. I was scared. I felt overwhelmed with joy. I was sleep deprived. I was edgy. I was thrilled. I was amazed. I felt very vulnerable. I had a lot of anxiety, right? We have this huge mashup of emotions as new parents. Well, I'd like you to look at this set of emotions and think about your teenagers who are at the gateway of adulthood. They are being born into a new body and a new brain. Their brain will go through a massive reconstruction during the adolescent years. They are no longer fully a child, but they are not an adult yet. They are just at the gateway. And so they're also feeling all these feelings. They're excited and vulnerable and amazed by it all. Maybe they're in love with life or peers. They're overjoyed, they're scared, they're anxiety ridden. So we can really relate to the beginning of the teenage years by thinking about our own feelings as we became new parents. So, Gigi, if you would plow us forward, we're going to talk about some of the themes of teen development, actually. And this just the illustration shows that teens become super aware of their peers' opinions, their friends' opinions. It becomes their survival. Teens become a part of a tribe or try to become a part of a tribe. One thing to know, I hear parents frustrated by the fact that teens are so invested in their peers. Maybe they're not getting the kind of time with them that they used to, or attention from their teens that they used to. And I've heard parents worry about an over investment in peers. But I think we have to remember that children who are at the gateway of adulthood, looking at adolescence, realize that they need a tribe in order to survive in the world on their own someday. And so investing in their friendship groups is incredibly important. And we can't downplay those relationships because they take on a whole new meaning in the teen years, and they're critically important. Our teens also have a whole new set of emotions. This is because of their brain reconstruction. Literally, as our brains develop, we move forward from the back brainstem forward, and our brains start to make connections from the back of the brain to our higher order thinking skills. So, as our teens are evolving and growing, we can encourage this brain development by making connections between their choices, their actions today, and consequences tomorrow. I'm talking about responsible decision making skills. And the way that we do that is by sharing stories that are in the news, by reflecting on things that happen with friends, and talking about, what do you think the outcome will be? What will happen? And drawing those links between cause and effect. Believe it or not, it is a higher order thinking skill to be able to do that. And our teens need lots of practice in order to make those connections. This is where our own values, deep values as parents, come in. What do we believe? How do we want to raise our children to think ethically about their choices? And asking our teens good questions to prompt their thinking is so important in them nurturing those brain connections to develop those higher order thinking skills. We experience this push me, pull you constantly with our teens. They at some points they need us. They feel vulnerable, or they're having difficulties with friends. They're highly emotional, and they're needing our support desperately. And then at other times, they want us to go away. They're embarrassed by us. They don't want us anywhere around. They need their time. They need their space. And the message here, I think, is to remind ourselves to not take it personally. I kind of try to reiterate the mantra. It's not personal. It's adolescent development, right? They need this back and forth. I want to be independent, but yet I'm still dependent. I think we also have to be aware of our own projecting of our hopes and dreams for our future of our teens, and what their vision and hopes for their future is or are. And we can assume that they don't know exactly, that they're formulating their ideas of a future, but our future sometimes for our children can be really defined. Well, we want them to go to a top college, of course, and we want them to get a good paying job, and we want them to get married, we want grandchildren, but these can be definitions of success that don't fit with our teens emerging identity. So how can we be open to helping them grow a sense of their future, and their identity in ways that are supportive? Beck says, my daughter doesn't seem to care what other people think, which is good in a way, but she doesn't even brush her hair because she doesn't care. What's the best way to deal with something like that? I so understand that. You don't, in one way, you want to protect them. Like, you don't want her to go to school with her hair all crazy because you know that she'll get picked on for it. Yet you also want to encourage her to not care what others think. Some of it, I would guess, might be her age and her awareness level, that she is not self-conscious yet in that way, which I think is a wonderful thing. Um, so I think it's a good thing that she doesn't care yet. I'm gonna say give it a year or two. Um, because she'll likely get there, if she gets comments from others at school, and if there are gentle ways that you can help her with her hair without showing that there's something wrong, but just that this is part of our morning routine. I do it, dad does it, we all, as part of our morning routine, comb our hair. So we want to bring you into the hygiene fold. We all want to do combing hair as a part of our morning routine. That would be my best suggestion. Thanks for that, Bex. Allison said, I find having to practice naming emotions with my 12-year-old is just like you do with a toddler. You are so right, Allison. It's the same intense growth phase. You're so right. And they actually call those preteen to early teen years a second toddler phase. So you're absolutely right. You do get that same sense. And I don't know if you've had this experience, but I noticed around 12, I began to get challenges of power struggles that felt like the toddler years. Like they were the same kind of challenges to me that I had gotten when he was a toddler and didn't want to eat his peas and would throw them on the floor, right? So you're absolutely right, and so I think we do go through um, this need to rename emotions, to talk about them. And it's hard, but I think you can get more subtle when they're 12, and they're resistant to talking about anything, if that's the case with your 12-year-old. And you can uh, just reflect. I see this on your face today. I can see it. I can see it in your body posture today. You're kind of slumped over. You're not feeling all together, are you? So I think our reflections on how they're feeling matter in that emotion rehearsal. This picture I prompts me to say that we our teens job, part of their job is to push us away, and we can get hurt. It is normal to feel hurt as parents of teens, because we miss them. They're busier, they're pushing us away more, and it can be sad for us as we lose their attention, their approval, all those things. Yet our teens need us to show them unconditional love. They need to hear it, they need to feel it, they need our touch, they still need our hugs and our pats and our touches, for their development. So we have to find moments, and it is a matter of seizing those moments to show our unconditional love, because even when they're pushing us away, they still need that feeling of love from us. And that's just an example. They are going through the big emotions, and they need to feel safe with us, so that when they're out with their peers, they know they can always come home, and we're not going to judge them. We are going to listen to them and embrace them for who they are, who they're becoming, even though their sense of who they're becoming is shaky at this point. They know that they have a safe place where we will show them love. So critical. All right, so I'm going to change gears here a bit. We're moving out of the ages and stages, and I'm going to ask an odd question. So bear with me. How many of you have a fire safety plan in your house? So, how many of you have smoke alarms or an exit plan? How many of you have fire safety plans in your house, or have gotten smoke alarms, or you've taken those safety precautions? Morgan says we have. Us, yeah. I hope you have, because 1 in 4 households will actually have a fire big enough that it merits calling the fire department. So hopefully you put those fire safety measures into place. Now, if we could go forward on the slide, how many of you have planned for emotional fires? How many of you have a plan in place for emotional fires? When I ask this question, not quite yet. When I ask this question in room full, auditorium full of parents, I get no hands, because we don't. Yet every family will have emotional fires, and some more regularly, especially in stressful times. So I'm going to give you this tiny much of brain science here. If you can see on our little rudimentary illustration of the brain, there in pink is the amygdala. And that is what we would call the cave person brain. That's the part of the brain that developed very first, and it controls our survival. So a lot of people know about that. The part that they don't realize often is that when we have a moment of big feelings, like we're super angry, we're frustrated, we're fearful, there is a chemical that washes over the rest of our brain, and it acts like a border wall. It isolates our amygdala so that the only thoughts we can have are fight, flight, or freeze. We don't have access to logic or creativity or language or problem solving. We can only think fight, flight, or freeze. This is so critical when thinking about our family lives, because if we think we're going to be amazingly emotionally intelligent when we're so upset, we're kidding ourselves unless we've planned ahead. If we have a strategy, if we have a plan in place, then it can be more reflexive and we are able to access it faster, right? Now, I want to also mention, as we're looking at this brain, that this breathing stuff that Moshi recommends, and that so many mindfulness strategies contain, breathing is not just a nice to have. It actually serves a physiological function of removing that chemical from the rest of the brain so that we have access to logic and creativity. So in those moments, calming down really matters. Here's the other thing. We as parents, we think, when our child is really upset, we'll teach them a lesson. They need to learn a lesson, right? But they're so upset, it is impossible to teach a lesson other than how to calm down in those moments, because they are taken over. Daniel Goleman, author of Emotional Intelligence, called it emotionally hijacked. They are hijacked. We are hijacked. We're going nowhere until we breathe and calm down to access more parts of our brain than fight, flight, or freeze. Because fight, flight, or freeze often guides us to actions that don't create healthy relationships in family life. So let's take a look at the next slide. This is free, downloadable from the link right here from my site. It's called A Family Emotional Safety Plan, and I also have a Spanish version. It is basically a one-page template that you can fill in for yourself, And then you can do it with family members to say, when I am really upset, what am I going to say? And mine has always been, Mommy needs 5 minutes. And I say the same thing every time. It needs to be simple and memorable, and preferably have some physical action involved, so that it helps you as you're really upset. And then where will you go? In your house with young children, sometimes we need to stay in the room, make sure they're safe, but sometimes we can kind of, while we're in the room, go within ourselves. Or can you leave the room? Can you walk outside? So it guides you through these prompts to think through, what am I going to do in case of an emotional fire? And once you have planned these areas of what you're going to do, you share the plan with your family. Why is that so important? When I was a young child, my mom would she would leave the house when she was really angry, and she would go into the car. And sometimes she would go for a drive, or sometimes she'd just sit in the car. But as a young child, I remember being so scared. I thought she was leaving me. I didn't understand. So if we prepare our family members for what we are going to do and say in those emotional fire moments, they're prepared and we're prepared. Confidence, right? We know we're ready for an emotional fire with ourselves, and our children know that when we're doing it, they can recognize that we're working our plan. And maybe they don't recognize it the first time or the second time, but the third time and the fourth time, they're going to recognize it. We have a plan, and we do the same thing every time. Again, it gives us this twofer. It gives us this opportunity to model self-management skills that are so powerful and will last throughout your entire child's lifetime. This is great. This is a great activity that I do with lots of families. How can you, at a dinner time, at a Sunday breakfast, sit down and make a list of coping strategies when your child is really upset? And this is something you can do with young children or teenagers. When they're really upset, how can you think of different strategies that will help them feel better? It's really wonderful to come up with this with your children. Make this list, like hug a bear. I can hold a pillow. I can listen to music. I can do a puzzle. If they're older, they can go on a bike ride or walk outside. What are these coping strategies that we can write down, and then we can post them somewhere in our household where our children can see them? And when they come to us upset, we can say, remember your list? Remember that list we created? Go check it out. See if there's one on that list that's going to make you feel better. Again, teaching such powerful self-management skills that they can learn to soothe themselves. And again, these are skills that can last a lifetime. So important. This drawing is really about recognizing our own patterns as parents. Have you ever had the situation where you've said, I sound like my mother? And maybe it's not such a good thing. Now, I'm sure that there are moments when you've sounded like your mother and you intentionally want to sound like your mother. But certainly there are moments when we repeat things from our own childhood upbringing that are not things we want to repeat. So what is so important here is that we reflect and become intentional about what we say and do, and what patterns we pass on, and what we stop right here. So, one example is a strength of my upbringing is my parents really emphasized service. How will you be of service to others? How can you be empathetic find out what others need and fulfill those needs. So that was something that I gained from my own parents that I value for my son and want to teach him. And I have the confidence that because it was part of my training growing up, that I will do it. It'll be, I don't have to worry so much about it because it's a part of who I am. And so it will become through my modeling a part of who he will become. But there were patterns I did not want to repeat. I didn't want to repeat shutting down emotions, negative, or I should say, challenging emotions that my parents didn't want to hear. I wanted to create a safe place for my child to express even challenging emotions. So that was something I needed to work on. How can I not shut things down, but how can I become intentional about allowing a safe space for even challenging, painful emotions? So, what are those things for you? It's really important that we think and reflect on what aligns with our current values and what we want to replace from our upbringing. Parents who work to manage their own stress in healthy ways are far more likely to be empathetic with the social and emotional learning of their children. So, thank you, Gigi. If you could go one more forward. If we, one really simple practice I use is every morning when I get, if you're a coffee or a tea drinker, whatever drink you're having in the morning, but it works so well with hot beverages. If you're smelling the aroma of your coffee or tea, use it as a reminder that you need to take 10 deep breaths in order to be your best every single day. So take that time when you're having your morning coffee to ground yourself, to center yourself in your breath and prepare. If we do that, if we stove up our self-control for the day, we will be more ready to be supportive of our children and face the necessary challenges that they bring to us and be the patient parents, the confident parents we want to be. So we've talked about a lot. We are confident, ready. Our opportunity is to attune the love we feel with our deepest values, as we talked about, and our mindful, intentional actions and reactions to model and teach emotional intelligence. It really takes reflection, intentionality, and we've done some of that today, and hopefully you've benefited. What are some questions that you have? What's one thing that you learned? Is there anything that you're going to take away from what we've talked about today? Andy, thank you. He says, how do I help my child be comfortable in uncertain situations? And by your question, I'm reading that you have a child with a temperament that maybe is more fearful in new situations, uncertain situations. And I feel like it's a test for all of us right now in these uncertain times when we're dealing with a global pandemic. Dealing with uncertainty is a theme, right? For all of us. It's hard to see our children when they're so worked up, nervous, scared, maybe even refuse to get into a new situation because of their fears. But there's been really good research about how to help our children in those situations. The key is to help move them toward the new situation that they're afraid of in ways that they consent. In other words, you move a little bit, you take some safe steps together, and then you check in and see how they're doing. And you move incrementally toward this uncertain situation. For example, if it's a new preschool, I think dry runs are a great thing where you go when no one is there. Be in the environment, but no people are there yet, and just hang out in the circumstance. I remember when my son was really scared to fly. And so and it was I think it was one of his first flights. We went to the airport ahead of time and we hung out in the airport. We had lunch in the airport and we had no time schedule that day. We just got into the environment and got a sense of it. And he felt safe and comfortable. And on the day we took the flight, it was no problem. Okay, we have last question coming. Okay, Morgan says advice for pandemic babies' parents. It's a hard question, right? Advice for pandemic babies, parents of pandemic babies. My advice for parents of babies in a pandemic is that parenting can be isolating when we're not in a global pandemic, but add to it a pandemic, and parenting a baby can be incredibly isolating. And yet we know that children are best raised in a village. And one of kind of the four pieces of resilience, parenting resilience, is asking for help. Asking for help is absolutely critical. So don't be shy. When you're a new parent, assemble your support team. Find out who's going to be there for you. Be unabashed in your ability to ask for support. Don't underestimate needing time away from baby. You need time to get away and then to get back, to be nurturing, to be loving. So assemble your support team and don't be embarrassed about asking for help. We all need a village to raise our babies. So hopefully that answers your question. We're getting to the end of our time, I believe. Is that right? Am I correct in saying that, my Moshi friends? I do want to, yes, Gigi says yes. I do want to give a little plug for my book. It is called Confident Parents, Confident Kids, Raising Emotional Intelligence from Toddlers to Teenagers. Raising emotional intelligence in ourselves and our kids from toddlers to teenagers. It does have an age by stage guide of children's social and emotional development and ways in which we can support it. It also addresses temperament and understanding how to support temperament. So Andy's question hopefully is responded to in the book. Check it out. It's wherever books are sold: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target online, Walmart online, all those outlets. So please do check it out. Allison says, as a mom of 3 daughters, I need to do a better job of not treating them all the same. They are all in very different developmental phases. Thanks for reviewing that. That is serious wisdom, Allison. You're so right. They are all in different developmental phases. And when we have multiple children, we're managing a lot. And we can't treat them all the same. So how can we take the time to notice where each is and how we can be responsive? Thank you so much, all. Thank you, Moshi. So appreciative of this time with you on a Sunday. And I wish you all confident, happy parenting. Take care.